All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. Today we're going to talk about some key injuries in the NFL, mostly Myles Garrett and his impact on the Defensive Player of the Year market. We'll talk stock up, stock down with the Packers up and the Saints down. Then we'll talk Coach of the Year, which is a bit of a mess after Dan Campbell and D'Amico Ryans both lost this week, throwing that market into flux. But Drew, let's start with Myles Garrett. Now we're recording this on Monday afternoon, so by the time this drops, there may be more of a clear diagnosis on Garrett. But what do you think is going to happen here, and what do you think of the ripples into the DPOY market?
I expect he'll miss some time. We may have seen the last of him in 2023. Wouldn't shock me. The quotes, the comments, the vibe, everything, the market betting against the Browns so aggressively, all of it tells the same story, and that there is no likelihood is low that Myles Garrett will suit up against the Rams this week. And if it's that serious of an injury, he's going to miss more time than that. He did, I believe, at one point in his career, miss about 5 weeks with the torn labrum in his shoulder. So this isn't a new thing. Assuming that's what this injury is, but I don't have any kind of inside details on that. And I think the Browns defense can get through this without taking an enormous step backwards. Are they going to be the number one defense moving forward rating wise? Absolutely not. Like, yeah, he matters. Don't get me wrong. But they do have a lot of depth. They've gotten nice contributions from a lot of young players on that line who will use this opportunity to, try to make a name for themselves. Jim Schwartz's scheme is a huge part of why their defense has been so successful this year. And I think overall the defensive side of the Cleveland, Browns as a handicapping endeavor, it should be fine. I wouldn't massively downgrade them. Where I would circle and be concerned about the Browns is what to do with their offense right now. DTR goes out with the concussion. PJ Walker's unplayable. It is very realistic that this may be a Joe Flacco game. Now the Browns are spending the week in LA to get ready for this contest, and so presumably they'll have like a week of concentrated practice, no distractions, and really kind of try to get things right on the offense. But there's lots of problems. The rushing offensively, rushing off. Offensive efficiency has dropped precipitously with some of the injuries they've sustained to the offensive line. Doesn't look like they have the tackle situation figured out at all. And if you put Joe Flacco, the statue back there, maybe you'll get a couple of deep defensive pass interference calls against the Rams. But overall, he's going to be a sitting duck for Aaron Donald and Jones. So this is or Byron Young. Ooh, that's a nice opportunity for him to kind of plant his flag in the defensive rookie of the year race if he can get a couple of sacks here. So really, really tough situation for the Browns offensively. I think the market moving from a look ahead of a pick 'em against the Rams to -5. Whew, that is some serious steam, and that's not all Myles Garrett. So, DTR on the road was going to be a hot fade anyway. But if it's Joe Flacco in his first start for this team, then I think we need to move the bar a little bit lower. Do you have a read on what's going to happen with the quarterback position for the Browns?
I think the thing is that it doesn't really matter that much because these guys are all bad. And I know DTR got the win against the Steelers, but he wasn't good in the game. No. And I think that you want DTR as your quarterback because at least there is the hope that he can get better and potentially be serviceable. And there's just no hope there with PJ Walker and Joe Flacco. We know exactly what they are. They're like vastly worse versions of Taylor Heineke, who's kind of the penthouse version of we know you're bad, we know what you are. And Walker and Flacco are worse. So DTR wasn't that bad against the Broncos, I thought, actually. He was solid enough. And so I guess it is a little bit of a hit, but the bigger issue is that you mentioned their offensive line is in kind of tatters, really, with the injuries they've had there. Amari Cooper is also banged up in the Denver game. And then defensively with Garrett. And look, the diagnosis will probably be out by the time this drops. But generally, when you say that you heard something pop in your shoulder and then you're wearing a sling and can't raise your arm, it's generally you're going to miss some time. And so Garrett was entering week 12. He was plus 100 even money to win Defensive Player of the Year. And I thought that price was too long, to be honest, and weighted accordingly. So now if he's done, from that market, which I suspect he probably is, then I think you're looking at a 3-man race, and I think it's Parsons, Watt, and Deron Bland. And I was probably lower on Deron Bland previous to Garrett's injury, just because I just thought it was so improbable that Bland would be able to beat Garrett, because Garrett was having such a momentous season and, carrying the Browns to a 7-3 record despite 3 quarterbacks and leading the league in sacks. Well, Garrett's just out of the market. Then Bland can absolutely win Defensive Player of the Year. It's a much lower bar to clear. I still think TJ Watt is probably your favorite, especially after what he did on Sunday with the 2 sacks. The fact that the Steelers are 7-4, they have an easy schedule. He's going to be able to feast on Kyler Murray, whoever's playing quarterback for the Patriots, Jake Browning, Gardner Minshew. He's going to get all these guys. He's got Geno Smith and that defensive line. His hardest matchup was against Lamar Jackson. He loves getting sacked. He loves getting sacked by TJ Watt as well. So I think Watt is now the favorite in this market if Garrett is out. But what do you think of that? And what do you think of Deron Bland?
I wouldn't say it's a certainty that Lamar Jackson's going to have to start Week 18, Jay. That might not be Tyler Huntley time. I agree with all of your breakdown. I was curious to see what your opinion was on Bland and whether he was a realistic candidate. Coming from nowhere in a market like this, where you're basically saying we are acknowledging you're the best defensive player in the game, is like borderline impossible for me to wrap my head around. Right? No, there are people who may vote for Deron Bland as second, third, fourth, or I guess they only do 1, 2, 3 in defense play there. There may be people that vote for Deron Bland third this year who did not know he was a Dallas Cowboy to start the season, right? And that's fascinating to me. But his stats are on par for what Stephon Gilmore did his Defensive Player of the Year campaign, and certainly these weren't cheap touchdowns. Like, he's doing some pretty amazing stuff. So I still think Parsons would be the guy, and if they split votes and that tilts favor even more in the direction of TJ Watt, then so be it. I just hope it doesn't take the shine off the job that Mike Tomlin has done for the Steelers, because that's really that's my key takeaway for how this team is doing what they're doing, despite all of the inefficiency at the quarterback position. But TJ Watt's, he's compiling stats. He's going to be threatening the sack record probably, unless something goes really sideways for him. But they're quiet. Right. And the Steelers defense doesn't really feel like an obvious top 5 unit to me overall. They have some issues with the secondary. They have some issues with the linebacking core. A lot of that is injuries. But, I'm hopeful that there's a way to kind of move the needle in sentiment and get Micah Parsons some consideration, because he deserves it more, I think. But maybe I'm an island on that.
No, I agree. I would have Parsons above Bland, certainly, but a couple of things that I think hurt Parsons and helped Bland in a way. One, I just think it's a numbers game with Parsons, where Watt has 13.5 sacks, Parsons has 11.5. Watt has 6 pass deflections and an interception touchdown. Parsons has 2 pass deflections. Watt has forced 3 fumbles. Parsons has forced 1. Watt's recovered 3 fumbles. Parsons has recovered 1. Like, it just doesn't. There's no real case to be made for Parsons over Watt statistically. The case is that Dallas have an amazing top 3, 4 defense in the league, and the Steelers have a pretty meh defense overall. But I think all of this kind of helps Deron Bland, because you don't have to compare. No one's going to want to. I don't think people are going to be very excited to vote for TJ Watt and reward that Steelers defense, which is fairly unthreatening. But you don't have to compare Deron Bland to TJ Watt statistically, because Bland has broken a record that stood for all of time. And also, I think the thing with Bland is that this isn't Trayvon Diggs from 2 years ago, where Diggs was racking gambling and getting these picks, and then also just getting burned for 60-yard touchdown passes. Now, Diggs actually became a much better cornerback after that, but Bland is the number 1 cornerback by PFF grade and was coming into this week before the most recent pick six. I think he's just awesome, and he might just be the best cornerback in football or thereabouts. So amazing. I think that he is very, very live. But let's see what happens to Garrett, and let's see if TJ Watt again. TJ Watt's going to screw me in this market.
I'm fully exposed, as I just didn't think he was going to. I didn't think he was going to beat Garrett. I didn't see this as a potential. I just didn't see this happening. And Yeah, how did the Steelers keep getting away with this?
Well, at least for us, and it is all about us, at least TJ is somewhat correlated with Mike Tomlin, coach of the year. So there is that to fall back on. All right. It's a career first, Drew, for Patrick Mahomes on Sunday Night Football. The reigning MVP will travel to Lambeau Field for the first time in his career to face not Aaron Rodgers, but Jordan Love and the Packers. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. All right, stock up, stock down after week 12. Stock up, we start with those Packers coming off the momentous victory over an insipid Detroit Lions outfit. The Chiefs are 6.5-point favorites against the Packers. The total is 42.5. Jordan Love is up to 11th in EPA per play. AKA higher than Lamar Jackson, who's your third favorite for MVP, higher than Jared Goff, Russell Wilson, much more pedigreed quarterbacks. Love has been quietly, well, not so quietly anymore after the Thanksgiving game, but he's been awesome the past month. Do you think that this is a team that is somewhat real now with the way that Love is playing?
It's a really, really tough question, and one that we need to get a solid answer on quickly, because this final third of the season, this is kind of how you make your tail end of the season money, on counting on like a player who improves from week 1 to week 11 and kind of taking the updated rating and running with it. This is a huge number for a Packers team that played really well last time we saw them. It's a huge number for the Chiefs to be laying when their offensive, even despite covering and having a glory-filled performance against the Raiders, there's still some cracks with this Chiefs team clearly on the offensive side. And yeah, Packers absolutely deserve a reasonable upgrade, and they have a way into the 7th seed of the in a wild card that nobody really seems to want to run away with in the NFC right now. Jordan Love going into the Thanksgiving Day game, the only question he really had to answer for me was like, can he operate efficiently in structure? And that is to say, he was really, really struggling in the opening scripted portion of offense. And it didn't make sense, because how can you be an inefficient quarterback to the tune of Zach Wilson's type of numbers in the first half of football games, and then in the second half, when things are kind of more backyard, we're adjusting on the fly, we're adapting to the situation we're in. He was under duress for pass rush as he was at a deficit, and teams are trying to put away games with the pass rush, and he was performing at Josh Allen levels in the second half. And it was like, this is a weird, very tough to square dichotomy. And I think with the short week and with the injuries the Packers sustained, I kind of want to give a lot of the credit to his success in the first half of the game and putting the Lions on their heels. A lot of that should just go to, they played a little bit more loose, a little bit less structured offense, and I think it works. And LaFleur may pivot into that being his style with Jordan Love until Jordan Love continues to improve. But at least I think they've seen enough now that they're going to continue this experiment for another year in Green Bay, as opposed to really pressing the panic button and drafting a quarterback. And what's crazy is 2 weeks ago, like, that was all that the Green Bay beat was talking about. Like, this guy his job was already replaced. Like, they were talking, well, man, we're gonna have a top 5 pick. Which quarterback should we go for? Do you think we'll get one of the top 2, or should we look at QB3? Like, that narrative now has flipped so aggressively and correctly. I find it fascinating, and I think Jordan Love in general should be rated as a top 15 quarterback in the NFL. As currently, as we currently look at starters, probably top 12. And I think as he gets his weapons back healthy, this offense should continue to improve. I don't know. I don't have high hopes that Aaron Jones is going to be available this week. That seemed like a multi-week type of injury to me. I haven't heard sincerely that they are considering him this week, but that's one to keep an eye on because he matters a ton. The rushing attack is wildly inefficient if it's only AJ Dillon back there, and that's kind of the one place you want to punch the Chiefs. And so I think that's the one injury that I have circled before I get involved betting Chiefs Packers this week. And it's fun that this game has juice, because a couple weeks ago I wouldn't have said that even with the with the smirk. So I think Packers need to be a top half of the NFL team overall, and I think the offense needs to be top half the way that Jordan Love is playing. And this is a shocking development considering where we started the season.
Yeah, I think the one note of caution is that Love, his improved performance has come against the defenses of the Rams, Steelers, Chargers, and Lions. And none of those defenses are particularly fearsome. The Rams and Lions and Chargers all have dreadful pass defenses. The Steelers are what they are. They're not terrible. They're not great either. So let's see what he does against Kansas City. But after that, doesn't really matter because it's Giants, Bucks, Panthers, Vikings, Bears. None of these teams have
Yeah.
imposing pass defenses.
Yeah.
So I think that Love should be in position to play pretty well down the stretch. He seems so in rhythm against the Lions, and it wasn't just the scramble stuff. He was just making perfect on time throws. And I think the key for him is that as someone who was completely exposed to Christian Watson last year in Offensive Rookie of the Year, and he never really became a threat, but he kind of got a little bit scary for a second down the end when bloody Aaron Rodgers just kept on feeding him touchdowns whenever they got in close. But as someone who was living in fear of Christian Watson, I watched a lot of him play last season, and I thought he was magnificent down the stretch. Like, he looked like a legit wide receiver one in the NFL, and he just hasn't shown that at all this season until Thanksgiving, where he looked like an absolute monster. And now they go up against the Chiefs defense, which is excellent, but I think it's become a little bit overrated. I thought that the Eagles game, they got away with some stuff, like the interception that L'Jarius Sneed had was because he got beaten on the route by A.J. Brown, basically. And A.J. Brown was streaking into the end zone, and then A.J. Brown should have had another touchdown as well. And then Aiden O'Connell was moving the ball very well in the first half against Kansas City. So I don't think that this is, a peak Browns with Garrett or Ravens type of defense. So I think that the Packers may have more success than people anticipate. And also, 10-day break is huge for Green Bay because they were really banged up. J.R. Alexander and Aaron Jones, the biggest names, but just missing a lot of players who should come back against Kansas.
Wicks, Campbell, the list was long. And then all those guys are healthy. I think the one thing we forgot to mention that's important to bring up, the Packers O-line is healthy and they're playing at a top 3 level.
Yeah.
So they're affording a young quarterback an opportunity to learn how to play the position without being under extreme duress, which is something you can't say about all of the other young quarterbacks who are failing.
Yep. I am with you there. All right. Stock down, much less inspiring situation in New Orleans, who would have been a much better bet for the playoffs than the Packers a week ago. Now, probably not, to be honest. I've got the Packers plus 105 fair to make the playoffs, and the Saints slightly longer than that. They are dealing with a ton of injuries. Marshall Lattimore is on IR. Chris Olave got concussed. Rashid Shaheed did his thigh. They're just running out of players, and they're in big trouble. They're now to 4-point dogs at home to the Lions, who look completely broken against the Packers. What do you think of this Saints team? Do you think that they can bounce back and win the NFC South as plus 150 dogs to do so now?
Oh, man. The Falcons schedule is so easy, I feel like. And the Falcons, I think, what's actually key? Falcons are undefeated in division. So they're almost certainly going to have the tiebreak. I don't know how the Saints get back in this, especially the way that Derek Carr is playing right now. It's been a very tough hang. And now you take away the vaunted weapons that sort of were the reason to believe in this team. I'm very, very interested to hear from the insiders in New Orleans on what the long-term, how long are we going to be without Olave and Shaheed here? Because if it's an extended period, if it's the rest of the season, then the Saints, you might as well absolutely stick a fork in them. They're not well coached. They're not well coordinated. Their offensive vision is atrocious. And really the thing that I want to kind of key on, because everybody knows the offense has been miserable all season. They've been miserable in the red zone. They just don't have any type of, philosophy or any kind of underpinnings that you're excited about in terms of, what some of the other offenses out there are doing in the NFL right now. But the real kind of downgrade on the Saints has to be their defense. Their rushing defense was a joke yesterday. And I know that you're up against one of the more unique and more outstanding rushing attacks in the NFL with the Falcons, but this is a unit you used to be able to count on was going to give you a very solid effort on both sides, but through the air, on the ground, every week, keep you in games. Lattimore being out absolutely matters this week against the Lions team, who should have absolutely no problem throwing. And the Lions, I thought, have now put together a handful of really, really solid efforts on the ground. Their offensive line is healthy. I think that this adjustment out to 4 for the Lions is completely justified. Saints, in my opinion, going forward are going to need some insane luck to get back into the NFC South race, even though it's a pillow fight. And I think I don't know, I bet some of that, and I'm pretty much ready to grade them losses after yesterday's result because, as I mentioned, like it's a super fine margin now, and their defense isn't playing well enough, and their quarterback play is not going to improve now that they have a lack of weapons. So weird turn of events for a Saints team that might be looking at themselves and wondering why they got them. Why did we sign Derek Carr again? What was the vision here? Like what was the plan? How are we a 5-win team? Like this is a pretty tough campaign, I think, when the dust settles, and they're probably going to be under 500.
Yeah, and their schedule is easy the rest of the way, but they have this game home to Detroit where they're 4-point dogs, and then they have games at the Rams, at Tampa Bay, which are not layups either for this team, just because they're not very good. Meanwhile, the Falcons, their schedule, they get a pretty decent break getting Tim Boyle this week, of all characters. And then after that, Tampa Bay at Carolina, home Indy, at Chicago, at New Orleans. That's about as easy as it gets. What's the line going to be if it's are the Cowboys going to be 7.5-point favorites in Atlanta?
Oh, higher. I would say higher for sure. Yeah. I mean, the Cowboys are going to be over a touchdown against whoever wins this nasty division in the 4-5 at this rate.
Yep. Pretty grim. All right. Before we get to a more upbeat topic, NFL Coach of the Year. Drew, if you want more Formula One after the recent Grand Prix in Vegas, check out CNBC's special podcast series, Inside Track, The Business of Formula One. An inside look at what's fueling F1's popularity and who is profiting. Hear from the biggest names in the game, the league CEOs, and the $1 million packages rolled out for the most elite fans. You can listen by following the Squawk on the Street podcast wherever you download and subscribe. All right, from that into Coach of the Year, where the great Dan Campbell is still favourite at plus 175. D'Amico Ryans is 4-1, which I think is way too short now that the division is more or less gone. Mike McDaniel, back from the dead, 6-1. And then Kevin O'Connell, we'll see what he does on Monday Night Football. We're taping this before he has played. And then Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen, Sean Payton. And then offensively, we've taken this long to get to our man Mike Tomlin at 16-1. And thus ends, for the most part, the list of viable candidates. Do you think there is a new horse in this market to bet?
Well, I think the two that you have to pay attention to are down the list a little ways.
Okay.
And they are Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen, two guys that shared that coaching room last year, and an offensive philosophy that is working still in today's NFL. We're not out of the realm of possibility of the Eagles finishing with one loss, which is unfreaking believable considering they're getting outplayed every week. And, we continue to joke about, the Bills coming due, the schedule hell, blah, blah, blah. Like, they're playing a different style of football. They're playing 4-down football. Everybody else is playing 3. Like it ultimately is a huge factor in their success this season. They have an unstoppable play in the tush push, and Jalen Hurts is apparently now healthier, and he's getting healthy. Will presumably get healthy down the stretch. So if the Eagles can run the table from here and they beat basically every other contender, and they're the clear 1 seed in the NFC, and I think you're still going to be able to make a case against Hurts for MVP because his numbers just aren't going to be up to snuff with some of the other elite quarterbacks. But the default then becomes Sirianni is the guy for Coach of the Year if you have a 16-1 has never been done. Like that's quite cool. I know that we've had a 16-0, but with the new format going, with that kind of record would warrant consideration surely. The Nick Sirianni, the Shane Steichen case is interesting just because the Colts all of a sudden are sitting in very, very prime position to steal a playoff spot. I don't think anyone saw this coming. And yes, it's not as fun of a story as the D'Amico Ryans, kind of case was to say out loud, but pretty clearly more impressive doing it with Gardner Minshew than doing it with a guy who's a bona fide top 7 quarterback in the NFL right now, and CJ Stroud. So, fascinating to see that campaign emerge. And if you look at the Colts' remaining schedule and the quarterbacks they face, I'm not sure this team is missing the playoffs, and I know none of us really want to handicap a Gardner Minshew wildcard game, but I think we need to start preparing ourselves for that.
Yep, no, I'm with you there. I think that Steichen, coach of the year wise, was the biggest mover out of the weekend. And it's not like there was such an impressive win, but just to be able to rack up that win while all the other candidates fell down. And now they have a very, very easy schedule to close. And so I've got them about 7-1 to get to 11 wins. And if you get to 11, if the team gets to 11-6 and is probably at that point a 5 seed, that's a pretty strong case. I don't think it's an unbeatable case, but that would be certainly would be able to win. With Sirianni, I think, look, firstly, if I had a vote, and strangely, I don't have a vote, but if I did have a vote, Drew, I would vote for Nick Sirianni. I think he's done the best job of anyone this season. I would have voted for Shanahan last year, I think, but Sirianni probably would have been second on my ballot. But just the fact that they do not shoot themselves in the foot at all, while every other team around them does, the aggressiveness on fourth down, just everything about this team, I agree. But I just think if they have even one loss, and I've got them plus 1250 to run the slate, and I think that should be about his coach of the year price. I don't think 10-1 is super appetizing. But if they do run the slate, then I think he very likely does win. Yeah. But if he has one loss, then they were a team that went 14-3 and made the Super Bowl last year, and they went 15-2 this year, and everyone kind of thinks they're worse. So I'm not sure. I think that a lot of the bloom, there is a chance that he might win if the vote were held today, just because he's 2 wins clear of everyone. But if he loses to San Francisco or at Dallas, or even at Seattle, which, by the way, is kind of going to be a difficult game for them, just coming off this brutal stretch. And then you go at Seattle, who's going to be desperate for their playoff lives and kitchen sink game and everything. I think if he even loses one of them, he's in a bit of trouble. What do you think about his potential at 15-2?
I think you're exactly right. A second loss, and it's we go back toward the rubric of who is the most surprising team.
Yep.
The real kind of narrative I'd like to hear you kind of expound on is Dan Campbell a false favorite at plus 175?
I think certainly I've got no appetite to bet Dan Campbell at plus 175. I think that's way too short. At the same time, I think he should probably still be the favorite just because two things. So one, I've got them plus 370 to get to 13 wins. I think if Dan Campbell gets to 13 wins, just one more loss the rest of the way, Lions, best season in Detroit Lions history. If he's closed the season 5-1, he'll have a lot of momentum. I think he probably just wins at that point, particularly now that Ryans is mostly out of the picture. And then the other thing too is that I think there is a way that he can win at 12-5, but we talked about this briefly yesterday, but I think he can only win at 12-5 if he beats Dallas in week 17 in primetime, the standalone Saturday night game. If he wins that game, it is going to be the most momentous Detroit Lions win, and he will get so much love off of that, even if they've scuffled a little bit before then. And so I think he's got these two paths. He can run the slate outside of losing to Dallas and be 13-4, or he can have a couple of losses but beat Dallas and get to 12-5. And I think that if that is the case, I think he can win. So for those reasons, I think he would be your favorite. I think the second favorite for me now is actually Mike McDaniel, just because they have a real chance of getting the 1 seed now. I know he has the stench of having lost every big game, but to close the season, they play Dallas, Baltimore, and then the Bills. Buffalo, if they go 2-1 in that stretch and get the 1 seed out of that, then I think McDaniel is extremely live.
Yeah. I agree that now is the buy low on McDaniel because the next 3 games, their cumulative margin of victory is probably going to be about 40, 45 points. It's going to be big.
They're going to be 11-3. Fast forward in franchise mode, they will get to 11-3.
The Dan Campbell point side that you made, I think, were perfectly fair. And you know what it sounded like to me? You're better off just betting Lions money line against Dallas than you're betting Dan Campbell plus 175. Because, what's that money line going to be? Plus 280? I mean, it's going to be a big number. The way Dallas is playing right now, and the way that the Detroit defense is coming into that one, that's going to be a big
Dallas going to be 5.5 point favorites.
I was thinking like 6, maybe.
Yeah, in that range, I would have thought. And it's funny because, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I might have felt like it was going to be 3.5. And then what we've seen from the Detroit defense has changed that. Before we wrap up, to me, and I'm not just saying this because of our positions, and also quickly, Sean Payton, I know he's getting a lot of buzz. Like, sure, if he runs the slate, fine. He's allowed to win Coach of the Year, maybe at that point. It's a wild card, even then it's not a lock. But I've got them 65-1 to run the slate. They don't have like brutal matchups on their schedule, but it's just a lot. It's a lot of games like at Houston where they're 3.5-point dogs. So I think that Peyton's up against it. But to me, the most interesting element of this market is how much do you think Mike Tomlin's candidacy will resonate if he's like a 12-5 wild card? So I think if he wins the division, he's in very good position. But do you think that he can win if he's a 12-5, or even an 11-6? He's probably cooked. But do you think at 12-5, if they lose one more time the rest of the way, that he can win?
It's you need so many other things to happen. I feel like that it's probably not likely. And I mean, realistically, this is going to be a sad received votes campaign for him this year. I think like he's finally going to get his votes, but it's not going to be enough to win. I don't think.
I think he has to win the division, and if he wins the division, which is about 5-1, then I think he's pretty live if they topple the Ravens to win that division.
Yeah, I agree with that.
He's 16-1 in the market, which to me is too big because I think that he's probably odds on if he wins the division. So he should be closer to.
I mean, no other coach in football this year, Jay, fired their offensive coordinator and then replaced him with the guy that put up 400 yards for the first time since 2020.
It's they're outgained. They're outgained in the first 10 games of the season, and they're
incredible.
7-4. It's kind of ridiculous. That's a strange one. I'm just not sure how much his case will resonate and how much people view that as just a fake team that has faked their way to 12-5 versus how much they think that this is a fake team that has Mike Tomlin their way to 12-5 and he needs to win Coach of the Year. I kind of lean towards the former, unfortunately, but there is definitely an opportunity. If he beats Baltimore in the last week of the season to win the division, I think
it'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah. All right, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks everyone watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. Please rate and subscribe if you're listening to us as a podcast, and also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you tomorrow.